In continuing to go back to the well, let's do another PragerU idiot.
Here's a medical miracle for you. A drug that relieves pain, reduces anxiety, improves your mood, and has no side effects.
You're not trying to hawk Wellbutrin again, are you?
Too good to be true? Well, millions of Americans believe that drug is marijuana. Are they right? I'm a physician, board-certified internist, and addiction medicine specialist.
Did you really think I wouldn't check up on you? You're a radio and TV personality. At best, your practice is part-time, and you certainly have no expertise in pharmaceutical research. By the way, before we get too further in, I just want to point out that this video was emailed to me by Zenithian. I'm pointing it out because I didn't have a chance to email him back. I have a lot to go through and I can't respond to every one, but I do try to read them.
I've treated thousands of people whose addictions to opiates, alcohol, and other drugs were wrecking their relationships, their careers, and their lives.
Yeah, this sounds like more AA crap to me. I've covered addiction science quite a bit, so I'll just summarize. Addiction is a symptom of an underlying problem. If you didn't fix that underlying problem, you didn't treat their addiction, and they will always relapse if you don't.
I'm telling you, marijuana can be both harmful and addictive.
Why should we listen to you after all the crap you spewed during COVID, much of which you had to publicly apologize for?
A 2022 Gallup survey found 30% of Americans between 18 and 34 use marijuana. When scientists at the University of Michigan asked young adults between 19 and 30 if they'd used it within the past month, 29% said yes in 2021, compared to 21% in 2016 and 17% in 2011. Daily marijuana use across all ages nearly doubled from 6% in 2011 to 11% in 2021. That translates into over 13 million Americans compared with 5 million in the decade before.
Yeah, those are some pretty big numbers, aren't they? And if you have numbers that big, it's inevitable that many of them are going to have problems, regardless of whether or not the marijuana had anything to do with it. And then people like you will always be able to cherry pick them to make your point. And yes, he does just that later on.
Keep in mind that marijuana has gone corporate. According to Forbes, legal marijuana is now a $20 billion industry and growing. There's a lot of vested interest in making sure you don't hear the bad news.
Yeah, this is one of those times when it's really hard to tell the difference between you guys and the Gravel Institute.
Some individuals, and not a small number, will have a significant reaction to marijuana.
You just showed us why it's not a small number. Because the overall number of marijuana users is not a small number.
And there's no way to know in advance. You won't know until it happens, and then it might be too late.
Scare, 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 scare. Everyone runs screaming from the scary herb. Except there are ways to know. This doesn't happen randomly. It's because these disorders already exist, even if they're not apparent.
It wasn't always like this. The marijuana people use today is not the weed of my generation.
Oh yeah, your weed is good, but what these young people use today, and their music is just noise, I tell ya!
Keith Humphreys, a Stanford University professor of psychiatry and drug policy advisor to Presidents Bush and Obama,
is not someone we should want to listen to. So thanks for giving us the information we need to know the guy has a political agenda to push.
Nearly 1/3 of users can't quit, at least not without help, despite the drug's negative effects on their lives. In 2023, JAMA Psychiatry published a study of marijuana habits among 6.5 million Danes over the age of 16.
You're gonna make me dig up the study, aren't ya? Thanks for not linking to it, by the way. And it wasn't easy. Searching for his title, which isn't even the title of the study, by the way, just took me to a lot of other scaremongering websites that didn't link to the study either. I had to go trolling through the tables of contents for JAMA Psychiatry for the last several months. On the way, I found far more papers viewing marijuana in a more positive light, mostly as a treatment for various disorders. Seriously, doing this isn't easy. So if you appreciate all this hard work I do for these videos, please show your appreciation by using the donate link below. Anyway, the one I think he's talking about is Cannabis Use Disorder and Subsequent Risk of Psychotic and Nonpsychotic Unipolar Depression and Bipolar Disorder. That's the only one I could find this year from Denmark at any rate.
The study found that marijuana addicts were twice as likely as non-users to be diagnosed with clinical depression and up to 4 times as likely to develop bipolar disorder with psychotic symptoms.
But this study was only an association. It didn't do anything to establish causation. And we know that addiction is a symptom of an underlying disorder. It's not that they didn't have bipolar disorder, they may have had it and just hadn't yet been diagnosed. Although the main part of the study is behind a paywall, the public portions make it clear that nothing in this study debunks the possibility of self-medication. A big clue is, if there were anything to this, we'd see a significant increase in bipolar disorder after countries and states legalize marijuana. And we don't.
A study in Norway, also published in 2023.
A study in Norway. Gotta love those references. The most relevant one I could find was published in The Lancet in June. References below. And by the way, at the end of the video, on the screen is the words, "Facts and sources from this video are available at prageru.com. I looked. They're not. See for yourself in this screenshot. And if you click on that facts and sources link, it just links you to news articles, not studies.
Concluded that among people who had no pre-existing mental health issues who'd had a psychotic incident after using marijuana, 27% develop what has been characterized as schizophrenia.
Assuming this is the right study, it said no such thing. The study confirmed that psychotic disorders, including schizophrenia, were more heritable and specifically polygenetic than they were the result of any sort of drug use. Polygenetic means that multiple genetic alleles together are associated with the disorder, as many as 27 loci. They found that a subgroup of people with these genes have a high risk of developing a psychotic disorder and using cannabis. In other words, marijuana use didn't cause the schizophrenia. They both have a genetic origin. I'm skipping a bunch of his anecdotes. Like I said, with numbers like that, you could pull out whatever you want to demonstrate whatever effect you want. And the plural of anecdote is not data.
Joshua and Kevin are not simply anecdotes.
Yeah, they are. That's exactly what they are. I could name much worse anecdotes for you, by the way, the Celebrity Rehab people who didn't fare any better after being on your show than before.
A 2023 JAMA study found that cannabis-linked attempted
squigglies
have increased at an...
Hey, I need to break in to talk about what just happened. YouTube is making me censor this video. And it's ridiculous, because Dr. Hack Drew talks about squigglies quite a bit. Not actual squigglies, I can't even say the word. And it's ridiculous. I'm not in any way promoting or glorifying squigglies or any form of self-squiggly. I'm just trying to talk about the association between people who smoke marijuana and people who exit stage left just the way PragerU gets to. If you don't think this is fair, then you can complain to @TeamYouTube on X, and you can help by going to donate.bogosity.tv and making up for it a bit. And if you want to watch the uncensored version of this video, I'll be upping it to Odyssey and Rumble. What kind of policy is it that will let Dr. Drew lie about science, hide his sources, and leave it to people like me to put in the work to show they do not claim what he says they do, but then censor me when I try to give that information to you? So forgive the idiotic censorship. I'm just trying to get the truth out to the biggest audience I can. You can help by donating and sharing the video. Sorry about that. Let's get back to it.
A 2023 JAMA study found that cannabis-linked attempted
squigglies
have increased at an average rate of 17% a year.
And still no citations. I shouldn't have to try and dig these up, by the way. He's making the claim, so the burden of proof is on him. And if he can't even be bothered to cite the studies properly, we should just dismiss what he says entirely. In this case, there are a lot of studies examining the link between cannabis use and attempted squigglies, so it's really difficult to find. I'm looking for one that makes this 17% increase per year claim. I found one that said that attempted and completed squigglies among cannabis users increased to 17% all total, up from around 10% in 2009, and another said that exposure increased 17% annually. None said that squigglies increased 17% annually. I'm gonna assume it's the second one. The authors of that study found intentional, suspected, squiggle cannabis exposures reported to U.S. poison centers increased from 2009 to 2021. Most involved other substances. Due to the cross-sectional nature of the data, we could not identify a causal association between cannabis use and a squiggle attempt. And if any of these end up being the wrong study, it's not my fault. Pinsky didn't cite his sources, and it's up to him to back up his claims. Not properly citing your sources is exactly the same as not having any. Once again, the drug warriors have nothing. So thanks for watching. Please hit like and subscribe, leave a comment, and go to donate.bogosity.tv to keep me doing what I do. And check out all the great content here, like this video selected just for you.